distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Welcome to this week's episode of Make It Plain. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, and thanks for watching if you're on YouTube. Please do remember, like, subscribe, follow. Thank you again for all the support. This week, you're going to have a Black United Front interview. The Black United Front is the global direction of Black organizations that we're building, that's really going to try and reach out and have as many organizations as we can as possible. And this is building up to the Convention of African People next year that we're hosting in Gambia, May 17th to 19th, on Malcolm's birthday, to build Harambee organization into this global organization. So I'm joined by Eshe Kiama Zuri, who does a number of different organizations, including DOULAS DECOLONISIng, the Anima print, which prints specialist literature, was part of the UK Mutual Aid Network, which gave out lots of money for different projects, as you can hear in an interview. And also, Eshe is part of the CAP 25 steering committee, and their role on this is really head of what we, on the steering committee, we have a marginalised identities group that looks at, LGBTQIA+, other marginal identities, even talking about other different marginal identities within Blackness, to make sure that, everybody's in. All Black people need to be included. This is really, really important. So organization, we've said that actually is really, really, really important that we think about this. How do we include everybody? How do you make sure that when we say Black, we mean all Black people? This is a fundamental principle of radical Black organizing. Please do check out an interview. We talk about all this with Eshe as well. So please do tap into that interview. All right, for the introduction, this week, there's only really one thing to talk about in the UK, and the UK is lost its damn mind, frankly, over the last, week or so, following a stabbing of an attack on a children's party where 3 young girls were killed and many other injured. And I'm going to gloss over this because this actually isn't the point, right? The point isn't this horrible attack that happened, this young man, we don't really even know all the details, attacked, stabbed up this party, very, very, very gruesome. I'm skipping over it because this is not the point, right? So much misinformation has come out of this. He's a Muslim, he's an immigrant, it seems like all of this is wrong anyway. This was seized upon by the right and sparked off all these riots and all this violence that you've seen over the country in the last week. But like I said, that is incidental. It's a terrible tragedy, but really has nothing to do with the actual problem. The problem is, what were people jumping on? People like Nigel Farage. If you don't know Nigel Farage, is essentially just a thug and a fascist in a suit. Someone who's been made into the mainstream. Someone who's been the voice of the people. Blah blah blah. Really, really is now actually in Parliament. Stood for UK Parliament. I think it was 7 times. Lost every time until last time. So now is a member of Parliament and has really become a mainstream figure. And the problem that we really have is there's been a lot of word about, this is poor white people. Like I always say, poor white people, working class white people. I even know if they're all poor, but this is white resentment about asylum seekers, about the immigrants, about the Muslims, about the country changing. All this nonsense that we're losing the country. Rhetoric, as Chris Rock once said in one of his comedy shows, if you're losing the country, who's winning? Because it ain't us, right? It definitely ain't us. But you see all these resentments have been poured out, but these resentments have been building up for a long, 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 long time. Even not even just Brexit, not even just that. They've been building up for so long, the dam was going to break eventually, and actually has broken before. But the worst way to think about what's happening now is the way it's been painted, is that this is the, riots are the voice, King said it, right? Riots are the voice of the unheard, right? This is not the case. When white people go crazy like this is not the voice of the unheard. The things they are saying, the grievances which they are leaking out on the street, going around beating people, harassing people, trying to burn down hotels and mosques, etc. We've heard these all the time. We hear these all the time. Like I said, Nigel Farage, who's now an MP, one of the most popular figures on the news programs, spouting all of this nonsense about asylum seekers, about the country changing. We hear this constantly. This is what led to the Brexit in 2016. It's why we left the European Union, because apparently there's too many immigrants. Apparently the country's changing too much. Mainstream politicians, and including the so-called left, Keir Starmer, Labour Party, have had this anti-immigrant thing for decades. All of them are part of this, right? Have stoked up these fears, have made them central. And again, this isn't new. Go back. Who was the Margaret Thatcher. This country's rather swamped when she wanted to get elected by immigrants. All right, this is a constant playbook. When there's a problem, you blame immigrants. Go back even further. Was it 68? Rivers of Blood speech. Enoch Powell. There's going to be war in the streets, too much immigration, send them back, etc., etc. You can find this all the way. We've heard this. This is not unheard. This is the expression of white racism in the street. We've heard it before. This is not unheard. And it is so different from when we have rebellions. You know, rebellions in the 80s, rebellions in the 90s, rebellions after the killing of Mark Duggan, rebellions in America. When black people are legitimately saying, look, we had enough. Our voices aren't being heard. We're being oppressed. We're being beat down by the police. We're having all these problems. No one's listening to us. And then we go express our rage in the streets. That is very, very different to the dominant population, the mainstream, looking at mainstream racism, getting angry, and then going and attacking us. It's not the same. Not the same things. One is a race riot, white race riot, terrible expression of racism. The other one, on the other hand, that's an uprising, that's rebellion, that's anti-racism. That's us saying that we have had enough and something needs to change. These two things they're not the same. Do not think about them the same. Do not look at them the same. Do not use Martin Luther King. I don't even like Martin Luther King particularly, but please do not use Martin Luther King to defend this racist nonsense. Right? Really important to be frame that straight away. The tradition of these riots that we're having, these racist riots that we're having, is a strong one in the UK. Not new. This isn't even new. You shouldn't even be surprised. 1919, when the first larger numbers of black people started to come into this country after the First World War, what happened? There were riots, race riots, just like this in Liverpool, Cardiff. People were killed. The stuff was burnt. People were beaten, etc., etc. Exactly the same thing happened. 1958, after Windrush generation starts coming in 45, really starts to take off a bit more in the 50s. More black and brown people in the country. What happens? White people get mad, start burning things. You're coming after our women. You're taking our jobs. Too much immigration. Go on the attack. 70s, 80s. Something called the National. We have the National Front here. When I grew up, there was still National Front NF signs around. There's many National Front marches. In 1981, the New Cross fire that sparked up till then, the biggest black demonstration in history, the National Black People's Day of Action, that was sparked by the New Cross fire. And people, which is a house party where 14 young people lost their lives. And the belief still is in many circles, that this was a racist fire because there was many fire bombings were happening by the NF at this time, National Front at this time, right? That's the context which you have. White people have done this all the time, right? Farage is more than likely involved in these kind of protests, and there was lots of suspicion that Nigel Farage was either a member of the National Front or he was certainly sympathetic to the National Front. We've had this kind of levels of racist violence. We kind of think we'd assumed they've gone away, but they hadn't. 70s, 80s, even 2001. 2001, Bradford and Oldham, same thing happened. You know, white people got mad that there were too many Asians and started wanting to go and attack people. And there was a response. So this isn't new, one. Seen it before, very, 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 very obvious, very, very easy to predict. And guess what all of those things come from? They came from mainstream. These weren't, these are the fascists, these are the right wing by themselves. These are supported by mainstream ideas at the time. And these riots today are supported by the mainstream ideas, right? The Tory party today, Conservative party in the UK, is essentially like the National Front on immigration. Close the borders, deport people to Rwanda, all this stuff, this is the expression of white racism which we've seen, and it gets played out on the streets. Same way in America. So in America, again, race riots, long history of race riots, white resentment, white people get mad, white people go around, tends to be far more extreme in America, burning, lynching. There's this great book called White Rage by Carol Anderson, which I recommend you read, which tells you all the details of it. In America, it's like gruesomely horrible because of the weaponry, because of the America, as I've said before, is Europe on steroids. So everything that happens in America happens worse, right? So one, there's nothing new about this, totally predictable, not unheard, cut all that nonsense. This is the product of the racism that we see on our TVs. We see it from our politicians all the time. And again, I really want to stress this. It's not just the Corella Bravermans. It's not just the Nigel Farages. It is the Keir Starmers. If you're going to come and say, stop the boats, no immigration, you're playing into it completely. right? 100% playing into it. So that's what's caused this. The media as well, right-wing media, the press, all of this stuff about immigrants. This isn't new. It's not unheard of. This is what we're seeing play out. And this was inevitable. So the blood is on the hands of the people doing the violence. The blood is also on the hands of the media and the politicians. All of them. All of them. Let's just be clear about that right now. All right? No. So when you're going to solve it, the question of how do you solve it then? And this is so. Actually, before I go into the solve it thing, other point to point out here. When you see this violence, it's not a coincidence. This violence starts in places like Southport, places like Hull, places like Middlesbrough, places like the. If you're not from the UK, you probably never heard of any of these places. One thing that these thugs have in common, these racist thugs have in common, they're cowards, right? I just got a message just now actually saying that Birmingham is supposed to be under attack. Alum Rock down in South Birmingham, Soho Road is my part of Birmingham. I could be wrong. I'm recording this on Wednesday. It comes out on Friday. I could be wrong. It could be the case that there was all these right-wing thugs have come through up into predominantly black and brown neighborhoods causing trouble. But I will be surprised. I will be shocked. Because these are the kind of people that are cowards. These are the kind of people that want to pick out one or two people and go beating people. That's them people. They're the people that want to come. Like, strangely enough, people, I can be getting texts saying, oh, how are you doing? How are you? My neighborhood, there ain't nobody coming through my neighborhood. I can't see it. It's like, I can walk around, there's no problems whatsoever. Right? The way, because of racial segregation, there are strongholds of us. Actually, most of the country, there's very, very few of us. That's why you're seeing these riots in places where there's a handful of us, but not that many. You come to Birmingham, you come to London, whole areas. There's a massive, gigantic area neighborhood where it's mostly us. Like where I see more Palestinian flags than I ever see British flags. Where you get some racists come around this area, there's going to be a reaction. It's going to be a problem, right? And these people are cowards. So I'll be shocked if any of that is true. We'll see. I mean, we saw in actually Birmingham when there was a rumor that they were going Alum Rock, heavily Asian neighborhood. People came out in force. You saw people came out in force to say no. So if people do come down in these ends, that will really be a problem because they will not. It's not going to go as it's gone in other parts. Because the cowardice of white rage, the cowardice is also important. And think about even in the States that cowardice. Think about things like the KKK, right? KKK go around in white hoods in the middle of the night, taking people out of houses to lynch them, etc., or defending gun ownership because they know they need to have guns to protect themselves from us so they can go and kill us, etc., etc., etc. There's a deep cowardice to all of this. So I'll be very, very surprised if there's massive incursions in London and Birmingham and places like that, because the response will not be what is expected. I remember when I was younger, so Handsworth's historically, not historically in the sense of post-women's generation, historically black, now predominantly Asian neighborhood in Birmingham. And there was the KKK, the rumors the British KKK were going to come through Handsworth. They lasted 10 minutes and left. Like that's the reality. The reality is that we've had to deal with this violence. And because we've had to deal with this violence, we know what to do, right? You know, the violence in Britain has really been hidden historically, so that we think it hasn't happened, but it has happened. There's so much of it's happened, and we've had to organize, protect ourselves, etc., etc., etc. So, I mean, for the civil order of things, I do hope that these idiots don't come through any of our neighborhoods because they will not go like they wanted to go, right? And that's when actually maybe you will get bloody. What was it? Enoch Powell talking about the tigers are flowing with much blood and race war, etc., etc. That's the way to spark a race war. But I strongly doubt that these cowardice people are going to come through those ends because that's not what their point is. They want to feel like the big men. They want to feel like they can pick on people. And when you get that pushback, they ain't really on it that deep. Like I said, I could be wrong on this. Let's see. But that does tell you also a lot about the racial politics of the country and about segregation. It's not a coincidence. It's in these areas that there's few of us that this thing starts. And maybe they're getting bold in the common areas that lots of us. Also tells you a bit about psychosis, right? Like in some of these places where there's all this violence, there's so few black and brown people. What are you doing? Like there's so few. Like what are you complaining about? All right. And you actually tend to find, I think, during the Brexit referendum, the evidence suggested that places with the least migrants are the most anti-immigration. Right. So there's less of us there, the more they don't like us. Whiteness is a psychosis. And what we're seeing on the streets right now really, really, really is the expression of the psychosis of whiteness, just on a large and violent scale. So thinking about what's the solution to this, right? How do we deal with this? What's the solution? Well, what we've seen so far is the mainstream don't want to deal with the problem. What we've had from Keir Starmer, new Prime Minister, is just more police, special police units to start to crack down, spend more police powers, heavy sentencing, etc., etc. That is always a bad idea, particularly because you know that all of those things are going to come back to us at some point. Like, you know that all these extra police are just going to be more black people arrested at some point. So I wouldn't be cheering for the fact that it's brutal crackdown. Obviously, you need to protect people. Obviously, you need to arrest people. Obviously, yes. But when we think about criminal justice and we talk about abolishing police and all this stuff, we have to be clear about what that means. If we're supporting additional police powers to deal with this, just bear in mind, those additional police powers will come back to haunt us. That is the undoubted boomerang effect. But the bigger problem with this idea about this is just simply a policing issue. This is what Britain does with its racism. It says we have these bad races, these few bad races, right? Those are the problem. We can just police them, we can just lock them up. And in fact, that's largely what we did in the 70s, 80s. Change the laws, crack down on things like the National Front, we just put it underground. But what this has shown is it's gone underground, but it hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, right? And it will come up when it needs to. And again, the bigger problem, this isn't about far right. This isn't about the so-called races. This is about mainstream political discourse. This is about all the political parties saying immigration is too high. We need to get rid of this. We need to cut this. We need to do this. British. That's what it's about. So you can't solve this problem just by locking up the people who are violent. You would hope that the politicians recognize and see that this is the result of them. This is their words put into action, and therefore there will be a big step back on all of this and a proper accounting of what is happening and understanding what the nation is. But that's not going to happen. I can promise you that is not going to happen. I mean, when you think about most of the immigration in this country, so majority of the immigration in this country is a Commonwealth, British Empire immigration. My family's here because my family was taken by Britain to the Caribbean as enslaved in Jamaica. And then we came over and then migrated from Jamaica to here, right? Most people in this country, immigrants, darkies, if you like, have that legacy. The biggest thing you have to, when you say this country, the biggest misunderstanding here about what this country is, this country was empire. And my family were in the Caribbean, they were in Britain. When people in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they were in Britain. When people were in Nigeria, Ghana, they were in Britain. Right? So most of the people are actually British in a very real way. I hate to say I'm British. I never say I'm British. You don't like that. I'm black and I'm in Britain. But if you actually understood what the country was, we'd understand that we are here because you were there. That's Stephen London. We are here because you were there. We got every right to be here. And if you think about the new migrants, asylum seekers in places that weren't part of the British Empire, well, they're only coming because the British Empire in the West has mashed up their countries. That's the only reason. People don't run into the UK because they want to be. It's a great place to live. Oh, great, the UK, yeah, wonderful. They run it because there's jobs, economics. Because we're part of this country, and I say we, I have to say we at this point, is part of a global empire that run down these people's countries, so they have to flee and come here. So we've had an honest accounting of all of this. We have to look at it very, very, very differently. But I promise you, that's not going to be the outcome of this. That's not going to be, let's really start to think and start to look at, start to be more responsible with our language. It's going to be crackdown. It's going to be changing the laws. It's going to be always in this racist. It's going to be really, you know what, next time, one of the times, I'm going to do a whole thing on this, the racist. There's no such thing as a racist. We just stop using that language, the racist in the streets. Nah, that's not. It's all racist. The system is racist and the system produces this violence. This is the logical result of the system that we have, right? This isn't an aberration. It's not an outlier. It's not an accident. It's not the far right. This is the racism that the system produces, and we're seeing it now in its most violent form. This is Britain. This is as British as a cup of tea, as British as slavery, colonialism, and everything else. This is Britain. And hopefully you can see it. Hopefully you can see it now. Because I don't know how many conversations I've had to have with people where they're saying Britain's not racist, Britain's not this, Britain's not that. And sometimes you need that wake-up call, right? You need to see the skinhead and the thug and the anti-leader to see it. But it's always been there. It's not different. It's not new. It's not some magical, look at this now, different. No, this is just showing you what it is. So hopefully now you've seen the wolf. This is the wolf, right? Hopefully now that we've seen the wolf, we can start to understand that the fox is just as bad. We can start to understand that we need to overhaul, start to understand that there's no way that we can just carry on as we're going on, because the only thing that's going to ultimately happen, this can happen again and again and again, right? This cycle of racist white riots, white rage on the streets, uprising, rebellions, more oppression, more police, goes round and round and round and round and round. We need radical solutions to these things and not just what we're going to have, unfortunately, from the government. So like I said, in fact, I wrote a piece on this for Make It Plain, so you can check it out on Make It Plain, make-it-plain, make-it-plain.org. Do follow all of what's going on with everything as well. And after the break, we're going to have interviewed Eshe Kiama Zuri. Please do tap into that. Black United Front's really important because what we're trying to do is say, actually, we need to create something else. And part of that is CAP 25. That's our first step. CAP 25 is bring us together, bring the organization together, bring the work that we're doing together. So please do tap in to the Black United Front interview with Eshe Kiama Zuri. Find out the work that's being done. And stay safe out there as well. If you are, and if you do get caught up in any of these problems, please do make sure you stay safe out there. All right, thanks. All right, so we have another Black United Front interview. We're going to hear about some of the great work that's going on the ground. So we have with me today Eshe Kiama Zuri, who's based in Nottingham, also helping out with the Convention of African People as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But Eshe, I will let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eshe Kiama Zuri. I'm a doula, an activist, also a chef from Nottingham. I try to get involved as much as I can in community work across all areas, but I also have some projects that I have co-founded, co-run, and those are what I'd really like to talk about today.
Yeah, so firstly, bit of context. Nottingham, what's the Nottingham's one of the centers of Black migration, has a long history. What's it like being growing up for this generation? How old? I should say this generation. I don't know how old you are. How old? What is your
I'm 28.
28. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's it been like?
It's been good. Nottingham is an interesting place, I think, because we're so much smaller than other cities across the UK. So whilst we have like a high number of Black African people here, it still feels quite close-knit, quite family-like. We don't necessarily have the same experiences as the biggest cities, I don't think. We all know each other. We all know what events are going on. We all support each other and kind of pitch in, which I really appreciate.
Okay. And what are some of the, before we said there's a lot of organizations you're part of. What do you want to, what's the key, I guess? What's the key ones you want to focus on?
Probably talk about, I try and go in chronological order as well to I feel like everything links in with each other. The experiences of one from the past experiences the one in the future, and that's the kind of Sankofa like ritual with organizing, with community activism. So back in about 2016, I co-founded Vegans of Colour UK, which at the time was a bit more impressive than it is now because we didn't have that many vegans, so we were all quite hyped to get involved with each other, to communicate. I have kind of moved away from the term vegan as I feel that it is a little bit appropriative. You know, we had our own pre-colonial traditions of vegan eating and lifestyle. So yeah, but then from that, I went in and set up Notts Queer Pride in Nottingham, which I did through an organisation that I founded called Notts Activist Wellness. And that was what really got me very interested in community building, like on the ground. And from there, Notts Activist Wellness created UK Mutual Aid, and that was back in 2018. So ahead before the pandemic, mutual aid networks, it was a little disappointing to wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, everyone's talking about UK Mutual Aid. And it wasn't talking about the UK Mutual Aid that already existed. It wasn't talking about the mutual aid networks that were already vastly across the whole of the UK. The working class, marginalised, Black and brown communities had been doing to survive. Instead, they wanted to talk about white middle class people for once deciding to care about somebody other than themselves. And it was only because their experience was hard.
When you say mutual aid, what do you mean by mutual aid?
So by mutual aid, I mean community building. I think mutual aid, you have to take it away from some of the more academic specific terms. Like I'm not talking about mutual aid through Kropotkin. I'm talking about mutual aid through survival. what communities provide to each other to enable everybody to be able to survive. And so that can be financial, that can be non-financial, it can be acts as simple as food kitchens, or sharing food with your neighbors. It can be creating these partner schemes or financial schemes in which people are putting money into a pot, and then once a month somebody is taking out that lump sum of money, but then giving back in the future. There are so many different ways that we engage with mutual aid as Black communities that are just natural to us. It almost doesn't have to be labelled as such, but that's the thing with words.
Yeah. So in the mutual aid, what kind of projects?
So UK Mutual Aid was online based. We were based on a Facebook group, but we had over 2,000 members. We were promoting this idea of person-to-person funding, community funding, as well as personal reparations. So person-to-person community funding was somebody posts a request within the group saying, hey, I need £300 for this thing. And then all of the people who see that post fulfill that directly to that person. So we're cutting out the middleman, whereas with the charity structure, everything has to go through them. It has to be approved. It goes through multiple hoops. This bit gets scooped off for wages, this bit gets scooped off for the bank, and by the end of it, you're left with a lot less. This instead was, okay, how can we listen to and trust what people are asking us for, right? Because we have to have trust within community. I shouldn't be saying, oh, that person's asking for £300. Is that dodgy? Do I need them to fill out an entire form to be able to get it? Do I need them to prove their income to be able to get it? No, they should just be able to get it because they need it. And we trust that. We're a community. And so what was happening was people were receiving money from each other within the group. And then when they had it and somebody else needed it, they were passing it back on. And that's what we call a solidarity economy. So within the group, we had created £180,000 worth of solidarity economy funding, which had come just from person-to-person funding, which had not come from any grant funding. It had not come from any community groups. It had not come from the state. It had just come from my pocket into your pocket, into my pocket, into your pocket, around and around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. And is that still going on there?
So we're on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, mostly because it is increasingly difficult to be able to do any kind of financial support as a non-registered organisation now. We've had PayPal shut down, Cash App shut down, bank accounts shut down, and, the state really wants to control and spy on where we use our financial, like our assets, our money, and we don't believe in that. So, yeah, we're trying to find some alternatives, but it's taking a while.
That is the problem in the activist space, is the regulation becomes overregulated.
Yeah, it does, and it's hard to encourage people to think outside of these spaces when you're being told, oh, don't do that because you may be punished. And then people are thinking, okay, now I'm scared. Whereas if we all stand up and we all say we don't care, we're going to do it anyway. They can't punish all of us. We can push back, but unfortunately, when you don't have that momentum, it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah, and also, part of the thing that's happened is that activism has kind of become it's become more professionalized, right? So there's particular things you're supposed to do, steps you're supposed to do, ways you're supposed to register. Then it becomes kind of corporate, and then if you're outside of that, it becomes very difficult to function. Then you can't do the things you really want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, I was going to start. I'm not going to start ranting. This is not about me ranting about.
No, but it goes back to trust, right? We should be able to trust each other in what it is that we're doing for the community. We should not need to be approved by a white British governing body, organizations, people. We don't need an overseer. We're able to organize. We always have. But we're starting to distrust each other more because these regulations are becoming more strong. So we're starting to think, oh, maybe I should go and snitch on that person over there, or maybe they shouldn't be doing that in a sneaky way. But actually, being sneaky, doing things behind the back of the state is how we've managed to get everything done so far. It's how we managed to keep ourselves alive. And we have to go back to doing that.
Yeah. I remember when we started, it was Organisation of Black Unity before it was Harambee Organisation of Black Unity. And this was 2013, it was a while ago, 12 years ago. And there was an established organisation I won't name because they're still around. And the elder lady, she said, you need to come and work, be on our board first and learn how to be an organisation before you start anything. I was like, huh? What is that? Is that what we do? No, never. We never took up the invitation, as you probably imagine. But that's become like professional Negroes. That's what we call it, professional Negroes. There's a way to do things, and this is just the way you do it. And they've done some really dodgy stuff. Again, I'm not going to go into it, but one day I will.
And these people, they love to waste time. They're actually professional time wasters. They're agents of the state who waste time. Why should I sit in a 6-hour meeting just to make a decision that me and my comrades can make on the street in the moment?
Yeah.
You know, that's time wasting. That's taking away my time and my energy to just sit and do this back and forth for you then to tell me, actually, you don't think I should do that anyway. And now I have to either not do it or do it without your support. I could have just done it in the first place.
Yeah. That is a frustration, I tell you. But yeah, sorry, you said there were other organisations.
I mean, with UK Mutual Aid as well, we had like a whole range of things. We had language and translation services. We had we supported with parolee requests and cases. So we would go to parole court cases and we would say, look, this person has a community to come back to. This is the proof of the community. These are the things that we can offer, you know, somebody to deliver food, somebody to help integrate them into society. And this is the support that we offer. And we did quite a lot of that in the pandemic. And it was really helpful for people. And something that I think a lot of people don't really think about is that, yeah, of course you should try and use the community that you have to be like, to offer it to people who may be coming into that space, but may not feel comfortable straight away as well to come straight into these spaces when they've been away from them for so long. There are a lot of things to think about that we just take as everyday kind of things. Using a mobile phone, technology, how things change so much in an area, gentrification, that a person coming in might not want to come and reach out to a community space themselves. But if you've shown that you want to support them and that you're able to understand where they're coming from, it was really helpful. We had a lot of good feedback from that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's not just financial; it's also like aid is.
It's non-financial too. I mean, you know, it's community support. We had a list of people who were registering to be guarantors for people because renting is really hard, especially when you're, you know, a marginalised working class Black person. It's really hard to have somebody who earns enough to be a guarantor on a property if you need to rent. So, you know, there were all of these things that we were trying to think, what are the limits that people are having at the moment to being able to survive? We wanted to be able to support people to thrive, but the start point is to ensure that people can survive, and we go from there. And I think running UK Mutual Aid for so long it informs everything else that I do now, that I try and look quite holistically, like across the board at, okay, even if I put this project on, I put this event on, what are the barriers that might come up? And that's what I'm trying to do with this conference as well. That's
a nice segue into CAP 25. So listeners should know Convention of African People being organised for Malcolm X's birthday, 100th birthday in Gambia from May 17th to May 19th, 2025. And the whole purpose is to kind of build the global organisation vision, laying the foundation for what should be Harambee Organisation Black Unity around the world. Ambitious, but hey, you know, why not? Eshe is part of the marginalised identities part of the steering committee.
Yeah.
Is that the way to put it? That's probably the way. Part of it. So actually, that part of the steering committee was your idea. So I guess why were you so keen to have a marginalised identities part for the steering committee?
I think that there are so many events that happen, so many spaces that are created that are not fully inclusive. And we sometimes think that just being a space for Black people, for African people, is inclusive enough. But it doesn't take into account all of the different spaces a person is coming from to then come into this shared space. And that is especially important for those who are Black and. When we look at intersectionality, we want to look at what are people's other identities. People are Black and LGBTQIA+. They're Black and disabled. They're Black and working class. And we can't just look at only the Black part and ignore the rest, because it leaves these spaces exclusive. It means that people aren't going to want to come and access them. And the people who do access them are going to be experiencing harm whilst they're there, whether intentionally or unintentionally, through people's biases, stereotypes, oppressive thoughts. Because we're all on a learning journey. We all have them. We are never going to be fully well-rounded people who are perfect to be around, who interact perfectly with each other. And so it's about trying to counteract some of those, trying to, ahead of time, plan for where things may be exclusionary, where things may be oppressive, and try and ensure that we're making the changes as the structure, as the space, which is meant to be a safe space, rather than, telling a bunch of people that they either can or can't come, but if they come, they may experience harm, but that's not on us. It is on us, and we can do better.
This is with any Black organization, you have to be honest about. There's some bad ideas in Black communities. There really are some really bad ideas around gender, around sexuality, around transphobia, etc. So I guess the question is how do we deal with that within organizing something which will attract? It is open to anybody. It's going to attract a lot of people, and it will attract a lot of people with bad ideas. So how do we keep people safe in that context?
So I think that once you are quite open about how inclusive you want to be, how intentionally inclusive you want to be, you do kind of lose the people who have the worst kind of oppressive thoughts, because they just don't want to engage in those ways. They actually see that, and they see that as a challenge, and they're like, oh no, you don't want me there then. It's like, okay, sure, it's for you to decide whether you want to come in. You are included in the space. Nobody is telling you cannot come to the space, but you cannot perpetuate what is actually Western oppressive thoughts and beliefs whilst in that space. And if you can't do that, then that's for you to decide that you can't come. But when we create these structures that are in place ahead of time, rather than having to reform something after the fact because issues come up, we're actually creating a revolutionary structure to begin with. We're being intentional, we're being inclusive. And my way of doing that is I've written a very, very long document that has a lot of explanations about why it's important to include certain groups of people, why we identify certain groups of people as well, because some people get confused as to why does that person need their identity? What ties to that identity do they have? And people are comfortable with being identified in certain ways, but also we have to be aware that other people identify us in certain ways. And so we sometimes can't help that. We don't want to be tied to an identity, but sometimes that is what people are going to see from us. And so it's important for us to understand what those different identities mean, what the different terminology means, and how easy it actually is to be inclusive. The very, very simple changes that we can make that can make everybody feel comfortable rather than only some people. Because when we're only including the most privileged of us, then the most marginalised of us are being doubly oppressed because we're oppressing them again to get this privilege. It's like being a Black capitalist and exploiting Black people in other countries, or even in your own country. Why would you do that? We don't need to create those structures. We don't need to replicate white Western structures. We have a choice, and we should take the choice to be more inclusive.
What are a couple of the ways that it's easy to be inclusive?
I mean, language is a really, really easy one. It takes a little while for people to get used to changes in language, but sometimes it can just take a little bit of practice, writing things down a few times, speaking to some people. So one that I always say is, as African people, we love the brothers and sisters, brothers and sisters, brothers and sisters. And we can literally just say brothers, sisters, and siblings if we want to. Or we could just say siblings. Or we could say comrades. Or we could say people. We could say folks. We could say, everybody here attending. There are very simple ways that we can change our language, and we often do and don't realize that we're being inclusive in other ways, because we will sometimes stand up and we'll say, welcome everyone. And we won't think that that's us, specifically using an inclusive term, but we use those terms anyway. So it can be so easy to make the switch from just brothers and sisters to something like brothers, sisters, and siblings, and include all of our non-gender, non-binary, or, genderqueer people.
Okay. Yeah. No, one of the things also that's come up in thinking about the convention is, Gambia. To be honest, Gambia was mostly a practical choice, politically in the fact that it had to be on the African continent, but practical in the sense of there was a venue and it was available. But Gambia does have anti-LGBTQIA laws, and that is that's definitely going to propose a problem for the convention people coming to the convention. And no, this came up in the steering committee. So are there ways that we can ensure that people are safe in the convention on the visit?
Well, I have a project. My family has a project over in the Gambia. We have a bookshop over there. Used to be in Wellingara. It's now down in Tangi. We give away a lot of free books to local children. And so, I have been to Gambia before. And I will say that my experience was, I didn't feel like it was a negative experience per se. However, I know that other people who, are present in different ways may feel differently. And I think what I spoke about in the steering group as well, if you remember, was that we are identifying that LGBTQIA plus people may have issues over there, but we actually completely missed the fact that it is quite misogynistic over there as well. There are going to be problems for cisgender women too. And so again, when we look at this more holistically, like, everybody who is going over there needs to be safe, rather than just LGBTQIA plus people need to be safe, or just cisgender women need to be safe. Everybody needs to be safe. And we're all on the same page about, having each other's backs, challenging oppressive behavior or threats or violence when we see it happen, when it's being experienced. And we're not going to throw somebody under the bus, then automatically we become a safer space, right? And we can have these conversations over there too. We can, it's allies' responsibility as well to be people who are not necessarily going to experience harm from starting these conversations or having those conversations, to be able to engage with people. And every time I've spoken to a Gambian person, the conversation has always been very open. It has always been that, we're sharing information, rather than us going in and saying, this is what we want you to know. We have to understand that, it's a conversation, it's a journey, it's a dialogue. It's not just, we're going to go there and say, we want this or else. We understand that there are different traditions in that country, that there are things to be respectful of. And again, to use this as not just LGBTQIA plus people, but, if you were an unmarried couple kissing on the street, that may be seen as, something that some people may take offense to as well. And so it's not just about LGBTQIA plus people. It's instead about everybody's safety.
Yeah, no, that's an important way to frame it, I think, as well. And actually, one of the things, because we work, of course, with Kimberly Crenshaw on intersectionality, is we do often forget that the intersections, we kind of think about, like women, LGBTQ plus, disabled, but actually the intersection also goes the other way, right? Men, abled, that it's not a one-way thing. It is much more of an interaction and discussion across. So yeah, I guess I haven't actually asked anybody this question yet, and so I will ask you. You'll be the first person to ask this. Is you showing interest and time, giving up time for the convention?
Mm-hmm.
Why? What was it? What is it that? Why? What is it that attracted you to do that?
Well, in all honesty, my friend sent me the link. I sent the link to my dad. My dad went to the first meeting, came out of it, and was like, "You might find that interesting."
Uh-huh.
And I thought about it for a little while. I was like, I'm so used to these spaces being exclusionary spaces, being spaces where I would pop in and see what was happening and realize very quickly that this was not going to be inclusive of someone like myself.
Yeah.
But I joined the steering group meeting, and I was just listening, and I was seeing the openness that people were coming with, and that really drew me to get more involved in the project. But overall, I think that it's so important for us to have internationalist like solidarity. I think that we have kind of moved away from it a little bit too much in our organizing. Might be because life at home is so difficult as well. We're literally, drowning in stuff to do right here, right now, right in front of us. We don't travel as much, to different activist spaces. I have sat at Claudia Jones's old house and looked at Claudia Jones's pictures and seen her with, activists in Palestine, like activists in China, all of these different activist spaces, these conventions that happened. And I have either they've missed me because they're not targeted towards people who are like me, or I just haven't seen them happening enough. And it felt like too much work to try and figure something like that out on my own. And so I was very happy that you decided to be the one to do that.
It's definitely attached, but it's strange because we actually, like back in Claudia Jones's day, they didn't have anywhere near the technology and the ability to connect, but they did it way more.
I know.
It's really strange. Like it's so easy for us to connect now, but actually, it's the one thing we don't really tend to do.
Yeah.
And I do wonder why that is.
I think as well, with some, especially with organizing across Africa, possibly like in the Caribbean as well, is now because we take the online stuff for granted so much, we forget that not everybody has the same access to it. So we're not finding the alternative ways of, putting together postal teams or whatever to be able to go out and get those letters and stuff to people. We're just thinking, oh, they'll see it online, they'll see it on Facebook, and if they don't, then it's not my fault.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, even locally, I think we used to do online, and we used to actually print the paper rather. So we had Make It Plain. We used to print. We called it Say It Louder back in the day. We print it, we take it around community shops. Like we just don't do none of that no more. Now it's just online. You put it online. People come, they come, they don't come, they don't come. It's somehow it's lulled us into not being as community.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah. That's a shame. Anyway, so hopefully we're trying to we're really, really, really trying to combat this. And it's actually really is why we want to have it on the continent. And the next phase of trying to build is how do we really get grassroots people? Which is difficult, though, right? Because how do you do that? Because we do kind of rely on online, and everybody isn't online. But anyway, thank you for helping out with the convention. Very, very, very useful, very, very, very helpful, and much appreciated. But you did say you represent other organizations.
Yeah, go on. I'll run through the list real quick. So there's the Anima print as well, which is Black Run micro publishing project. We set up, say 2 years ago maybe. We've published one book so far, which was like funded through pre-orders, which allowed us to be able to publish in bulk. And the book is called Innocence and Corruption. It's by Ayana Goodfellow, who I'm hoping will come to the conference with me. And Ayana is an incredible young activist. They wrote this book, Innocence and Corruption, which is about anti-child ageism. They wrote it whilst they were a child. So they wrote it from the age of 15 to 17. It's a unique perspective on anti-child ageism from somebody who is actively experiencing it, but who has an incredible, like, revolutionary view on the world. And so it's so much more than just anti-child ageism. I'll actually have to get a copy to you so you can have a little look at it. I really do recommend that people have a read. We just don't hear enough from young people, and this young person decided to put it in a book, so we have no choice but to read it because we are adult allies in this situation. It is our responsibility to find out more about what young people are thinking and feeling.
Yeah. Okay. You said it's called Innocence and Corruption.
By I Am a Good Fellow.
And is it the book's still available? No.
Yes, it is. It's on the animaprint.org, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
And yeah, you can order a copy there, and I'll make sure that some are coming to the convention with me as well. We actually have some over in the Gambia at our bookshop, so yeah.
Okay. Okay. No, that's really positive. And young people is again, an excuse. I'm kind of old now, so I don't. Yeah. How to engage young people is a really, 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 really important. And again, something I think because we lost some of the community-based stuff, maybe we don't do as much or as well as we used to. But certainly something we're thinking about. Definitely. No, that sounds really positive. You mentioned the Doula organization as well?
Yeah, DOULAS Decolonizing. So DOULAS Decolonizing we set up back in October last year. We launched with a project that was around supporting Palestine. Both myself and the other organisers in DOULAS Decolonizing have been long-term, like, pro-Palestinian activists. And so we launched with an extended statement that we were asking doulas and reproductive justice, perinatal health workers to sign. It's a very long statement, but it's very, very good. It ties a lot of links between healthcare systems in this country and how Israel is using certain forms of abuse of healthcare systems over in Palestine to oppress Palestinian people. But within this, we decided that we didn't want to just be a project that was just writing. We have set up a free doula time bank, which means that we have a group of doulas who have offered their time for free, and people who are from Black, Brown, or other racially oppressed groups who are... I like how we say it on site. Let me find the exact phrasing because I feel like it slaps. We say all Black, Brown, or other racialized people who are directly affected by, displaced by, or diaspora to genocide, colonialism, white supremacy, and violence that is or has been supported by Britain at home and worldwide. And so that gives us, a nice wide group of people, and people can self-identify within that to come and ask for free doula support. Doula support is usually quite expensive. You're looking at, maybe over £1,000 for doula support.
It might be able to just explain for the listeners what a doula is. What does a doula do?
So a doula is a community person who is offering non-medical support to somebody throughout their reproductive, perinatal, pregnancy, postnatal journey. So you can have fertility doulas, you can have birth doulas, pregnancy doulas, postnatal doulas, abortion doulas, miscarriage doulas. And myself, I'm an emergency community doula, which means I help support people who have complex life situations and are within some phase of the perinatal journey. So may need something which is a little bit more community support than just based on the pregnancy alone. So, for instance, I've helped people access council housing and stuff so that they can come out of hospital and go into safe accommodation. But yeah, so doula, it's kind of a bit of a fancy term for a birth partner, a pregnancy partner, but we are community based. We are not midwives. We're not doctors. Some of us have trained as midwives before or trained as doctors before, but it is specifically non-medical. So it's like community based. And within DOULAS Decolonizing, as well as this free doula time bank, we also have some boycott campaigns. So we have a call to boycott new technology, which is to support our family in the Congo. And we, alongside that, set up a used tech bank. So people can send us their working, hopefully, used technology, and we can then give that out to people within our community who need it. So if one of our doulas needs a new phone or one of the people they're supporting needs a laptop, we try and organize that within our community to be able to fulfill that without having to buy new technology.
Okay.
Yeah. And alongside that, we also have the healthcare boycott, which is a call to healthcare providers to boycott companies, services, products which are Israeli based or have ties to Israel. And so that's following the BDS boycott, but with a few extras that we found to be quite specific to healthcare settings, like AXA as the provider of insurance, healthcare insurance, or Costa and Starbucks that happen to be at every hospital. Should we not have healthy food at hospitals anyway? But that's a side thing. But we definitely shouldn't have Israeli companies. So, yeah.
Oh, definitely. In terms of doula support, I mean, we have the statistics in the UK. Black women are what, 4.5, 5 times more likely to die in childbirth. I was reading the book. It's called "Pregnant While Black." It's a Jamaican woman in America wrote the book, and I'm sure she recommends doula support as being something that can help. I guess
in America they have a slightly different system where doulas are go through an accreditation process, so they're similar more to midwives, and so hospitals will be able to get you a doula over there, whereas over here we don't have any of that like certification accreditation. We're just community people who go through community training organizations. But I think that it's better because it allows us to work outside of the system completely. And we see how, yes, the system over here, the healthcare system, the NHS, is enabling this medical negligence, they like to call it. It is medical racism. It is a medical oppression where, Black birthing people are 4 to 5 times more likely to pass away during their perinatal phase. But also you have statistics, and again, this brings in the intersectionality, where we look at that statistic as a standalone statistic. It's terrible, right? We can acknowledge that it's terrible.
Yeah.
But then if you ask about Black birthing people who don't speak English as a first language or don't speak English well enough, then the rates jump to 25 times more likely to pass away in comparison to white British English-speaking people. And so again, that's the intersection where we're looking at, if we were just dealing with the statistic of just Black birthing people, we still wouldn't be dealing with the statistic for Black people who don't speak English. And then on top of that, you have LGBTQIA plus people, or people who will be experiencing like a sideline of that same oppression, the transphobic oppression. For instance, when Black birthing people present at hospital, white doctors, nurses may say, "Oh, you look masculine." A common thing which is laid against Black cisgender women. And that is a little form of transphobia that they are experiencing there as well. And they will experience the oppression based off of that. But then you will also have trans people, Black trans people, who be going into hospitals. And because all of the DEI training that the hospitals have done would be based off of white trans people or Black people, not Black trans people, you're not going to be able to get the appropriate support, and the rates are going to be so much higher as well. So these are all things really to think about, but I cannot recommend enough having a doula or doing doula training, even if you are just a person who is, a partner to somebody who is birthing, even if you're somebody who is in community with people who are birthing. This is a skill which is so important. We are always going to have people giving birth, losing births, aborting births. We are always going to have that in our society. And if we don't have those skills in ourselves to be able to support those people, we're letting down a massive amount of people, and it's such a simple thing to be able to go and do and to get the training, to at least just have the awareness, even if you don't want to practice as a doula, even if you don't want to be a doula. Understanding the process of what people go through and what the healthcare system does to people who experience pregnancy is so important.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do wonder because in the States, there's not universal healthcare. There's a massive problem with just people get access to healthcare, but obviously in the UK, it's not the problem. You got the NHS, but this probably is part of the problem for non-English speakers, right? But you have the same disparity, right? even though. So I guess this is the question: what can a doula do to kind of address that disparity? What's the work of a doula that would help to address some of those problems?
The biggest thing is be an advocate for people, because when somebody is experiencing the interaction with healthcare providers, or who is experiencing something that is happening within their body, they may not be able to advocate for themselves like the best at that time, or necessarily know what it is that they are advocating for. The sexual health education in this country is terrible. So many people go through their, whole childhood, teenagehood, adulthood, up until the point that they get to something like becoming pregnant, and they don't know how that happened. They don't know what to do when that happens, and nobody is making that information aware to them, or they're too ashamed to go and ask for it. But a doula is a person you can ask those questions to, but also we know what healthcare providers are meant to give to you, what support you're meant to get, what processes you're meant to go through, what they're meant to check for, signs of preeclampsia so that you don't pass away after giving birth, all of these things. We are there to ensure that the healthcare providers go through the correct processes. We're there to ensure that a person is able to get support if they want to be hysterical or they want to cry and, be upset. We're there to make sure that that then doesn't negatively impact how they're being treated. But we're also just there to be a support. So many people don't even have a person as a support. And we take that for granted so much in this society, which is so obsessed with the nuclear family still, despite the fact there are so many single parents out there, so many different styles of families and parents, different styles of couples and interactions that people have. We're still so obsessed with this idea that if you go into a doctor's office as a pregnant person, you are the woman, the wife, and you must have the man, your husband, with you. And if you don't have somebody there with you, you can be treated negatively just based off of that in the first place. But then also you don't have that support, and the support is essential.
Yeah, no, it's really important. Really important. It sounds like you're very busy.
Yeah.
Is there any other organisation you wanted to share?
I'll put one in right at the end. So myself and a friend set up Nottingham Nourishment Network, which is a CIC, a couple of years ago, to mostly focus on the disparities around food and nutrition, education and access to within our predominantly Black and Brown community. We live in what is considered a food desert. There are not enough shops around for the amount of people that are there. And when you do get to the shops, you are not necessarily finding healthy, culturally appropriate foods, right? And this is a problem across Black, Brown, working class areas across the entire country. So we wanted to do something about that, and we set up 3 projects under the Nottingham Nourishment Network CIC umbrella. One is Aitul Iwe, which is a mobile library. So we have some books around farming, around nutrition, around food, cookery books, and we're going to be doing some pop-ups with those where people can just come and sit and read with us, borrow a book or bring their own book, and we can have some open discussions. We have Aitul Aidana, which is our food and nutrition based wing, which is where we are creating easy recipes that people can access, whether they are able to get their culturally appropriate staples or not. So being able to redefine what staples mean for us in cultural food desert, but also how you can make food that is good for you, culturally appropriate, healthy, based off of things you might get from a food bank or things you might get from a shop that does not have very many options for you. And then with Aitul Abundance, we have a community garden. And so we're trying to grow some stuff which we hope will then help our community be able to access these fruits and vegetables, but get involved with the full cycle of where food comes from, why it's so important for us to have access to land in a country that is trying to deprive us more and more of the land that we should be able to put our hands in, touch, grow, and allowed to help support us, So we've been doing some growing, we've had some kids' workshops, we've had some volunteer days. It's been a journey. I've realised how tiring it is to do gardening, so props to anybody who's a gardener out here, because it's the most exhausting thing I've done. But we've got some corn, we've got some potatoes, we've got some onions, we've got some other stuff going in, and we're trying to create some other, a network of different community gardens across the city as well.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And I think also like the locals really, so with Cap 25, obviously we're trying to do the global. Actually, the all global things are just local things brought together, right? So that underground local work and providing food, health, security is really, really important too. So no, check that out if you are in Nottingham, certainly. But no, thank you. That was I learned a lot. I think it was really good to hear about the work that you do. You sound very busy. Make sure you get rests as well occasionally. And thank you also for the help again for the convention and everything and for this. Is there anything else you want to close on?
No, I think that's it. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk today. I said I wouldn't talk very much. I think I talked a lot. I'm really, really excited to continue working going forward. And yeah, if anybody wants to get involved in anything they've heard today or wants to connect in any way, please, please do. And you can find me at Eshe Kiama Zuri anywhere and everywhere. There is social media. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Maybe just spell it out so that people can.
ESHEKIAMAZURI.
Yes, so definitely check out Eshe. All right, well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay.